Now, what about the idea that we're safer with the devil we know in the form of Rishi Sunak? Chris is in Richmond. Good to hear you again, sir. You buying this?
Good morning. It's laughable, right? You've already talked about the numbers of military, 30% cut to the British Army since 2000. But let's go about personal data, right, in this increasingly cyber digital world. Personal info of almost 10,000 people in the police in Northern Ireland, including staff and back office staff, published on a public website in Northern Ireland last year on their watch. Tory MP providing the phone numbers of other MPs in a honey trap. And even yesterday, New Statesman journalist Rachel Cunliffe, she said she received an email on CC to 450-something people about the Conservative Party's own conference, which is potentially a clear breach of GDPR rules. This government is hopeless at managing your data.
Would you have trust in a government led by Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, at the end of the day, it can't be any worse than we've got now, right? Our troops have been decimated. The government can't keep our own data safe. It cannot get any worse, can it? And the idea that we link everything to Corbyn's
Well, that was my final question. How relevant or otherwise is this assertion that this is a man who campaigned not once but twice to bring Jeremy Corbyn in as Prime Minister?
Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate point. But at the end of the day, some of these people campaigned for Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister, and he was one of the worst in living memory. So it works both ways.
Not on defence, though, lastly, for Johnson. Is it?
No.
It's whether defence of the realm. It's how key you imagine defence of the realm is going to be, I guess, Chris. That's the one.
Well, yeah, it is a matter. But how did troop numbers go? How did capital equipment and purchasing go in the time that
British Army down 30%, Royal Navy, Royal Marines down by 24%, Royal Air Force down by 41.5%. I've got the numbers in front of me, Chris. And Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is joining us later in the show. Chris, thank you for that. Chris, Rudy, are you buying this argument, this line of attack over defence? Good morning.
Nick, they can't even stop the boats crossing the channel. So how are they going to defend people like China and Russia if they can't stop boats crossing the channel? Because you don't know who's in those boats.
They would say they're turning the boats back. They would say that Rwanda is the policy that would solve all of that. I could almost anticipate what Grant Shapps would say.
Yeah, they keep saying that. They're turning the boats back and the numbers are falling. And the only reason why the numbers were falling when he mentioned it was because of the weather.
Yeah, the
it
tide
wasn't to do with exactly.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with that. It's just spin. And, it doesn't matter if it's Labour or it's Tories, it's going to get worse. I mean, they haven't even got the planes to go on the aircraft carriers.
Would you feel safe with Sir Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister for the defence of the country? That's what the Conservatives will be, I think, majoring on over the coming months.
I don't think it'll be any different. I think it'll be the same old, I mean, the fact is, like I said to you, they've not increased the recommended increase in defence as what the Minister recommended. They're just saying about the budget. They've cut down all the police, they cut down the armies, they got rid of it all. It's like, closing the door after the horse is bolted. It's just ridiculous.
A lot of emails. Let's take two from the top. Kevin in Wellingborough, we're in a dangerous place for sure, but it's a dead cat, as in you hurl a dead cat on the table. Prisoners are being released early, no police response to crimes, the NHS is being destroyed, roads are undrivable. He wants you to look away from these things. Thank you, Kevin in Wellingborough. Alan in Andover, how can Sunak claim to have the defence and safety of our country as his number one priority? Someone should take him down to the southeast coast and watch the 400 a day unvetted men walking up our beaches, disappearing into the Kent countryside completely unhindered. These are hollow words. Everyone can see the Emperor is naked. Both him and Starmer are out of touch with the people of this country.
All through my service in the 80s, Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. We had a problem with the IRA. Then she increased the R&D to defeat the IRA on the counter-terrorism front. And we had the Falklands blow up, didn't we? Yes. Everything was pumped into the military. It's in the Tories' DNA. What Starmer's doing is listening to the focus groups who Mattison again. Whatever the swing voters want to hear, he'll carrot. Starmer is an avowed Corbynista. He stood by him for 4 long years in his shadow cabinet. He supported whatever Corbyn said against NATO and against the nuclear deterrent. Starmer is a political fraud, everybody, so wake up. This is too dangerous about defence, by the way, when he's playing these tricks.
But both Chris and Rudy point out that the Army has gone down by some 30%, the Navy and Marines 24%, the Royal Air Force 41.5%, and I've not spoken about the billions of pounds that has been misspent. Are the Conservatives any better, Shaun?
Nick, when you look at defence spending, you have to look at where we're better at. It's not about numbers on the ground now. It's conventional war. It's about counter-terrorism now and new techniques and new countermeasures, electronic. and that's where the focus is. I get, by the way, because David Davies was a chair of the committee what uncovered millions of pounds of waste. I understand that, and that's down to civil servants a lot of the time. But you have to listen to a defence analysis about where you're going to pump the money into. Maybe special forces or frontline troops, but not troops en masse anymore, or aircraft with more capabilities, like Grant Shapps said the other day. You'd be asking that question again. It's about enhancing what we've got. So going back to Starmer, he's a political charlatan, everybody. Do not buy it.
Certainly not. Sunak's appointed some fella that used to sell get-rich-quick schemes on the internet under a number of different names as his defence secretary. He reappointed Suella Braverman as Home Secretary after Liz Truss sacked her. You've got Cleverly, who jokes about using Rohypnol on his wife. I really don't feel safe with these toxic Tories at all, Nick.
Would you feel safe with Sir Keir?
I would. He's the former Director of Public Prosecutions. On the other hand, Sunak is purely a fellow who was a hedge fund manager that made his money out of other people's misfortune.
And the fact that Sir Keir had support for Jeremy Corbyn, that's not relevant now all these years on?
No, it's not relevant all these years on.
Under which government would you feel safer? Good morning.
Neither.
What needs to be done, Janice? How important is defence and safety to you?
It's very important, and I think that the government is saying that they are increasing the support for the Navy. Mm-hmm. However, I think the government is actually instructing the Navy to save money. And an example would be the university officers who train the potential new Navy recruits from the universities. They're changing their contracts and to save money. And,
so you obviously, you work in it, or someone you know, or one of your family
Somebody
members?
I know. Somebody I know.
Okay. And in terms that my listeners can understand, because obviously you're very close to this, what are they doing, and how do you think it's going to have a detrimental effect, Janice?
Well, it's not encouraging university training officers to remain if they are changing their contract. And the contract is changing that if they were to have an accident within the actual when they're training potential new recruits, then they wouldn't be covered. And also they are changing their pensions. So how is that encouraging training officers to remain and to recruit new people from universities?
When do the changes come in?
They're trying to enforce them at the moment.
When you say trying, what's the level of resistance?
But they find it very difficult to resist because obviously
they're military.
Yes.
Yeah. How are the changes justified? What's their line as the need to do them?
There is no line, I don't think. I'm not aware of what the line is, but all I'm aware of is about saving money.
Finally, what do you think the impact will be?
Potentially, they could lose university training officers. Potentially.